Artifact. The first time I met Emre Kaya, he was arguing with the fire marshal about how to save a painting that was already burning. I wasn't supposed to be at the Museum of Fine Arts that Tuesday evening. My flight from Boston to New York wasn't until Wednesday morning, and I had the night off, rare enough that I'd planned to spend it actually doing something normal like sleeping. Instead, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert: museum fire, non-structural, contained to East Wing, still under investigation. I didn't know why I cared. I flew planes, I didn't save paintings, but the Museum of Fine Arts was 5 minutes from my apartment, and I'd spent the last 3 years going there on layovers, looking at this one painting, a 15th century Ottoman miniature, something about impermanence and beauty. And when the emergency alert came through, the first thing I thought was, please don't let it burn. So I drove there, found myself standing outside the museum at 7 p.m., watching firefighters deploy, watching smoke pour from the East Wing's upper windows, watching the specific chaos of emergency response where nothing is certain except that everything is about to change. That's when I saw him. He was arguing with the fire marshal about humidity levels and textile preservation, wearing a museum ID and an expression of controlled desperation. Tall, dark-skinned, Turkish accent, thick underneath the Boston grown-up, moving with the precise motions of someone trained to handle fragile things. The painting is in the conservation lab, he was saying. 15th century, Ottoman miniature, irreplaceable. If the heat reaches the storage room, the pigment will oxidize, the paper will crack. We lose 400 years of history. Dr. Kaya, the fire marshal said carefully, we're not letting anyone in that building right now. Then I need equipment. Climate-controlled preservation case, materials to stabilize the piece. Something, anything. He looked like he was about to cry. That painting is the only surviving example of Baba Yusuf's work. There are no others. If this one burns, we're going to save it, the fire marshal said, and he meant it, but he also couldn't promise it. That's when Emre looked up and saw me standing at the perimeter, still in my pilot uniform from an earlier flight. His eyes were dark brown, desperate, and absolutely furious that the universe had put a pilot in a tuxedo at a museum fire when what they needed was a miracle. Are you here to help or to watch? He asked, and I understood then that I was in love with him, which was completely insane, but also the only thing that made sense in a moment where nothing else did. My name is Rafael Santos. I'm 27, Dominican-American, born in Boston to parents who'd escaped political persecution in the Dominican Republic with nothing but the determination to build something stable. My mother is a nurse. My father is an accountant. They wanted me to be safe, which is why they didn't understand when I became a commercial airline pilot, a job that requires trusting thousands of systems simultaneously, a job where one mistake kills 300 people. But I loved flying because it required absolute competence. No room for hesitation, no room for doubt, just the mathematics of altitude and speed and weather systems, and the specific clarity of knowing exactly what you're responsible for. When I first met Emre, I realized I'd been looking at paintings at the Museum of Fine Arts for 3 years, specifically because I wanted to meet someone like him, someone who cared about preservation the way I cared about safety, someone who understood that competence in your field was its own kind of love. I'm Captain Rafael Santos, I said, stepping forward, commercial pilot. I don't know anything about paintings, but I know about emergency protocols, and right now you need to move that painting out of the building before the heat reaches the conservation lab. That's not possible, Emre said. The fire is between us and the storage room. Then we go around, I said. What's the fire marshal not telling you? That they can't guarantee the structural integrity of the building if they open the walls to create a secondary route. I understood then. The only way to save the painting was to risk the building. The only way to risk the building was to find someone willing to break protocol. Show me the building schematics, I said. We worked in Emre's office, a small, meticulously organized room filled with conservation materials and documentation about every artifact in the museum. It was clear within 5 minutes that Emre wasn't just a conservator. He was an archivist of memory, someone who understood that preserving objects meant preserving the specific moment in history when humans had created beauty. Tell me something true, I said, looking at photographs of the painting, the Ottoman miniature, impossibly detailed, showing a moment of rest between travelers. Why does this painting matter so much that you're willing to risk the entire building for it? Emre set down the schematics. My family came from Turkey in 1998. We left everything, my grandmother's jewelry, my grandfather's letters, photographs of the house we'd lived in for 200 years. My parents said, "We have to leave now or we don't leave alive." He paused. I became a conservator because I wanted to make sure that people like my family didn't have to make that choice, that we could preserve memory, that we could keep the things that matter. I understood. So the painting is your family's letters. The painting is every family's letters, Emre said quietly. It's proof that humans create beautiful things even when everything is temporary, even when we might lose everything tomorrow. I reached across the desk and took his hand. I'm going to get you to that painting, and we're going to save it, I promise. You can't promise that, Emre said. I can, I said, because I'm Captain Rafael Santos, and I've never broken a promise about safety. Not once in 5 years of flying, and right now I'm promising you that we save the painting. The route was impossible. It required going through the East Wing's upper level, using a secondary staircase that was already compromised by heat, carrying a 40-pound preservation case, moving through a building that was actively on fire. But impossible was just another word for high stakes, and I'd been flying high-stakes situations my entire career. I coordinated with the fire marshal. I found a route through the building that wouldn't compromise structural integrity. I talked to the team about moving the painting in stages, first to a temporary climate-controlled space, then to the preservation case, then out of the building entirely. Umre handled the actual artifact, moving with the precision of someone trained to touch fragile things. We move in 45 seconds, I said. Fire crew on the stairwell. You carry the painting. I carry the preservation case. We don't stop. We don't look back. We trust the systems we've set up, and we move. What if the heat reaches the paper? Umre asked. Then we figure it out while the painting is still in the building. Umre nodded. He stopped being scared about 40 minutes ago, and now he was just competent, the way I got when I was flying through a storm. Absolute focus, absolute trust in the protocols we'd established, absolute faith that we could do this because we had to. The run took 11 minutes. Smoke, heat, the specific terror of knowing you're in a building that's actively trying to destroy you. But we made it to the secondary route. We made it to the temporary safe space. We made it to the preservation case. We made it out. Umre was crying in the parking lot, still holding the painting in its protective case, while the fire marshals continued fighting the blaze behind us. We did it, I said, putting my arm around him. The painting is safe. We did it, he repeated like he couldn't quite believe it. Then he turned and kissed me. Desperate, grateful, alive. Right there in the parking lot, while the Museum of Fine Arts burned behind us, and the painting that had survived 400 years survived one more night. I'm in love with you, he said against my mouth. I know we just met, and I know that's insane, but I'm in love with you. I'm in love with you too, I said. I've been in love with you for 3 years. I just didn't know it yet. 3 months later, the painting survived. The museum survived. The fire was contained to the East Wing, and the restoration took a team of conservators and a patience that only Emre possessed. But the Ottoman miniature made it through without serious damage, which was the only outcome that mattered. Emre had become something of a local hero. The museum director had given him a raise, had put him in charge of the entire conservation department, had made it clear that his work mattered more than any budget could quantify. He was saving things. He was preserving memory. And I'd realized something sitting in his apartment, watching him work on restoration documentation, eating takeout from his favorite Dominican restaurant down the street. Flying planes and preserving paintings were the exact same job. Both required absolute competence. Both required understanding that failure wasn't an option. Both required loving something enough to dedicate your entire life to keeping it safe. I'd also realized that I was done with the airline, that I didn't want to spend my career flying between cities anymore, that I wanted to stay in Boston, that I wanted to wake up next to Emre and spend my days making sure he had everything he needed to do his work. Tell me something true, Emre said one evening, working on conservation reports while I read at the other end of the couch. Like what? Like whether you're going to leave, because the museum director asked if I wanted to do a conservation fellowship at the Getty, a year in Los Angeles, restoration work on Ottoman artifacts. It's the opportunity I've been waiting for my entire career. I set down my book. When would you leave? 6 months. Then we have 6 months to figure out what we're doing, I said, and I'm coming with you. I'm quitting the airline. I'm applying to flight schools out there. I'm spending the year making sure you have everything you need to do your work. Emre set down his pen. You can't quit flying. I can, I said. Flying is my competence. But you're my purpose, and purposes are more important than competences. He kissed me then, and it felt like the right answer to a question I'd been asking since the moment I saw him arguing with a fire marshal about a painting. 6 months later, Los Angeles. I'd gotten my California flying credentials. I'd found work doing charter flights, less demanding than commercial aviation, but enough to keep my certification current. Mostly I spent my days making sure Emre had everything he needed: transportation to the Getty, access to climate-controlled workspaces, someone who understood that conservation work required focus and couldn't be interrupted. The fellowship was transforming Emre. He was working on pieces that had never been properly restored, pieces that were crumbling under the weight of centuries. He was bringing them back. He was preserving history. I was watching him do it, and I was in love with every moment of it. On their last night in Los Angeles, the fellowship ending, us preparing to move back to Boston, Emre took me to the Getty Museum at sunset. "I have something for you," he said. We were standing in front of a restored Ottoman miniature, not the painting we'd saved, but something similar, something old and beautiful and preserved. "I'm proposing," Emre said, and he was already on one knee, and he had a ring that looked like it had been made specifically for someone who understood that love was just another form of preservation. "Marry me. Keep flying, keep saving lives, but let me be the person you come home to. Let me be the permanence you trust." I said yes before he finished the question. 1 year later, Boston. The wedding was at the Museum of Fine Arts in the East Wing, which had been restored exactly the way Emre wanted it, carefully, respectfully, with attention to the original design. The painting we'd saved hung in the hallway leading to the reception space. Emre's parents came from Turkey. My parents came from the Dominican Republic. We stood together in front of a museum full of preserved things, and we promised to preserve each other. "I love you," I said, and Emre smiled, that specific smile he got when he was looking at something he'd saved, something fragile he'd learned to protect. "I love you too," he said, "always." CCTV footage, the Museum of Fine Arts, timestamp 1923-47. A man in a tuxedo stands in front of a restored 15th century Ottoman miniature. Another man in a tailored suit stands beside him, hand in his, wedding band visible. Behind them, the East Wing extends, restored, beautiful, permanent. In the painting's frame, a moment of rest between travelers. In the men's hands, a promise to preserve each other the way they preserve everything else. The end. Security footage timestamps 1923-47. A pilot and a conservator standing in front of the painting they saved. One knows how to navigate impossible systems. One knows how to preserve fragile things. Together, they created something that survived fire and time, and the specific miracle of finding each other in the chaos.